Walk into a gun shop this week and you'll notice empty spots where Glocks used to sit. Not just one model, whole families. If you think that's normal inventory noise, pause. Glock doesn't make moves like this by accident. They make them when they're rewriting the playbook. Today, I'm going to unpack what those moves mean. Leaked patents, odd test guns in police hands, discontinued calibers, and a set of design choices that could change how people buy, carry, and outfit striker-fired pistols for the next decade. By the end, you'll know whether Gen 6 is something to chase or something you should wait out. Are you the kind of shooter who upgrades every generation? Or the one who rides a reliable gun for years? Think about that while we walk through the details. It'll help when we get to the buying decision. The internal clues. What started the rumors? A few months back, forums lit up. People noticed models dropping from websites and dealers. 357 SIG and 45 GAP, both effectively gone. Certain Gen 4 and Gen 5 SKUs vanished. Separately, hobbyists and professionals started pulling up patents filed by Glock Technology GmbH. These weren't small texture or cosmetic patents. They pointed at architecture-level changes, fire control cassettes, striker-blocking takedown systems, a split-frame approach where the upper and lower are functionally different pieces. Then you add in field reports, a few anonymous test pistols turning up in law enforcement evaluations, and the picture starts to form. Glock is preparing something deliberate, not incremental. The drop-in trigger model, what it is and why it's important. One of the biggest ideas we see in filings is the drop-in trigger module. Picture the entire trigger mechanism, sear geometry, springs, connectors, packaged as a single replaceable unit. Remove the module, drop another in, and the pistol's trigger characteristics change. Why that matters? Customization without gunsmithing. Want a lighter, crisper pull at the range and a heavier, more deliberate pull for everyday carry. Swap modules. No cutting, no permanent modification. Factory-level options. Glock could offer performance modules out of the box. Aluminum shoes, improved geometry, controlled pre-travel. That's factory warranty-friendly customization. Product packaging. Instead of buying two guns, you buy one serialized fire control and add modules. That's a different value proposition. All that sounds great, but also introduces complexity. More interfaces, more parts, and tighter tolerances mean the engineering must be flawless. A drop-in cassette has to lock in securely, resist dirt and fouling, and survive thousands of rounds without change in trigger feel. If Glock pulls it off, it's big. If they don't, it could be a reliability headache. The safer takedown, solving a real-world risk. Another filing shows a physical striker block or a takedown system that removes the need to press the trigger to disassemble. That's appealingly simple in concept. Block the striker during disassembly so you don't have to pull the trigger to remove the slide. Why this is significant? It addresses a documented problem. Negligent discharges during maintenance happen when people forget to clear a gun. The fix reduces human error risk. For agencies and large training programs, a safer takedown simplifies procedures and reduces liability. That's not just a comfort feature. It's budget and risk management for departments. For civilian owners, it removes a small but real step that causes anxiety for new shooters and otherwise inexperienced owners. If implemented cleanly, it's the kind of practical safety change that becomes standard very fast. The modular frame concept. One upper, multiple grips. One of the most disruptive ideas in the patents is a split frame architecture. A fixed upper that holds rails, barrel, optics, and the serialized fire control. And a removable lower shell, the grip, that can be swapped for different sizes. Imagine this practical scenario. You own one serialized unit. For range days, you attach a full-size grip that gives you higher capacity and better control. For concealed carry, you swap to a compact shell with a shorter footprint. You keep the same trigger module, the same optic zero, and the same slide. This design promises consistency across configurations, same point of aim, same trigger feel, inventory efficiency for agencies, one fire control unit per officer, multiple shells for sizing, less redundancy for owners. You don't need two separate pistols to cover multiple roles. But there are obvious concerns. A seam in the frame invites skepticism. Will the mating surfaces hold up to recoil and long-term stress? Patent sketches show engineered interfaces, reinforced pins, and tongue-and-groove rails, which suggests Glock is thinking structurally, not just cosmetically. If the joinery is metal-reinforced and precisely machined, the split frame could be robust. If it's a weak clip fit, it will fail quickly. Optics integration, lower stack, stronger mount. Optics change pistol design expectations. People want a red dot on a carry gun. Historically, Glock's optics solution used adapter plates that added height and introduced opportunities for movement. The proposed fix is a direct mount cut. Machine the mounting footprint into the slide so the optic sits lower and tighter. Practical outcomes: lower height over bore, faster sight acquisition and less head position compromise. More secure mounting. Fewer zero shifts over thousands of rounds. Standardization. If the cut supports multiple adapter footprints, users can choose their dot while maintaining a rock-solid mount. For anyone who trains with dots, this is one of the cleanest upgrades Fender for velocity and consistency. It reduces one of the primary complaints avid red dot users had about older Glock optics setups. Market context. Why Glock is doing this now. Glock built its brand on simplicity, durability, and reliability. But the market moved. Competitors like SIG, Ruger, and Springfield pushed modularity, optics, and flatter factory triggers. Modern buyers ask for configurability out of the box. Glock's prior updates came in long cycles. Gen 4 to Gen 5 followed roughly a 7-year rhythm, and patents filed in 2020 to 2022 would need multi-year testing to reach production stability. So now, after prototypes and field evaluations, we're seeing the results emerging. This isn't opportunistic. It's planned evolution to remain competitive. What it means for existing owners. If you own a Gen 5 and it runs your carry or bedside load reliably, you are not suddenly obsolete. Practical performance doesn't vaporize because a new generation appears. But if your priorities include any of these, optics-ready carry, easier safe disassembly, or the flexibility to switch ergonomics without buying a second gun, Gen 6 will be attractive. Let's break it down by user type. The everyday defender. If your priority is a gun that works reliably when it matters, your Gen 5 remains a strong choice. Wait for prices to settle. The gearhead/early adopter. If you want the latest features and enjoy modding, getting an early Gen 6 could be rewarding, but expect a premium and initial scarcity in accessories. The competition shooter. The idea of swapping a match-grade module for competition and a duty module for carry on the same unit is very appealing. It could reduce the need for multiple dedicated pistols. Agencies and armories. The potential to standardize serialized units while swapping lower shells to fit officers could reduce inventory complexity and long-term cost. Price, aftermarket, and adoption risk. The biggest single lever on adoption will be price. If Glock positions Gen 6 as a premium product that justifies higher MSRPs because of modular capability, they can capture value, but they might also push many buyers to cheaper competitors. If they price it close to current Gen 5 models, adoption could be rapid. Another major variable is aftermarket compatibility. Decades of accessories fit Gen 4/5. Holsters, triggers, barrels, sights, slides. If Genesis 6 breaks backward compatibility with those parts, the aftermarket has to play catch-up. That lag could make early ownership expensive for modders who depend on third-party options. And if the architecture change is deep, some third-party vendors may choose to wait and see before investing. Regulatory and international considerations. Modular firearms attract regulatory attention. Laws vary. Some countries or jurisdictions treat serialized fire control units differently. Some ban modular elements outright. That could mean a staggered international rollout. The US might see Gen 6 first, while other markets get delayed or modified versions to comply with local rules. That affects global sales strategy and could create a patchwork release cadence. Potential scenarios for value and secondhand market. History shows new generation launches depress values of older models temporarily. When Generation 6 arrives, expect Generation 5 prices to soften, especially if wholesalers and dealers clear inventory. That's a buying window if you want a proven design at a discount. Conversely, rare discontinued models, for example, the .45 GAP or .357 SIG variants, could spike in collector value if supply truly tightens. So you might see both bargains and premiums appear in the used market at the same time. Deeper technical questions: durability, tolerances, and serviceability. From a technical view, there are questions only long-term testing can answer. Does a drop-in trigger module maintain identical geometry over time? Springs settle. Surfaces wear. How does Glock ensure consistent engagement and safe disconnector behavior over tens of thousands of rounds? How does the modular grip interface handle grit, sand, and salt? Interface tolerances must balance secure mating with tolerance for fouling. What will service and repair look like? Will serial-numbered fire control units be replaceable by armorers in the field? Will modules be user-serviceable or require factory exchange? These are the things range reviews and durability testing will reveal, and they're the things that separate a clever idea from a reliable fielded weapon. How competitors factor in. Competitors already offered some of these features in one form or another. SIG's P320 modularity, Ruger and Springfield's optics-ready solutions, and several manufacturers offering factory-tuned triggers mean Glock is late to the party in some respects. But Glock brings brand recognition and a huge installed base. If Glock's execution matches their reputation, they can quickly reclaim leadership on these features because adoption often follows the brand users already trust. Practical buying strategy. Step-by-step advice. If you're deciding what to do, use this framework. Define your immediate need: range toy, carry gun, home defense, or agency inventory. If you need a gun now for self-defense, buy what fits the need today. Don't let future models make you underprepared. If you want the latest tech and you have budget flexibility, be ready for early scarcity and premium prices. Factor in the possible lack of holster and accessory options in month 1. If you're price-sensitive, plan to wait 6 to 12 months post-launch. Watch for price drops on Gen 5 and for third-party support to appear. If you collect or flip, scan the market for early signals. Delisting of models, dealer buybacks, and trade-in activity. There will be opportunities. What to watch for at launch. On launch day, pay attention to 4 signals. Official specs. Are the features as described in patents actually present? Pricing and bundling. Do grip shells, modules, and spare parts cost more than buying a second gun? Reliability reports. Are reviewers posting thousands of rounds without malfunction? Aftermarket response. How quickly do holster makers, sight companies, and trigger vendors release compatible products? The interplay of these signals will tell you whether Gen 6 is a meaningful step forward or an expensive detour. Long-term outlook. If Glock gets it right. If Glock executes the engineering and markets sensibly, Gen 6 could change ownership patterns. Imagine a world where most shooters own one serialized unit and a set of grip shells for different roles. Imagine police departments reducing inventory complexity and training costs. Imagine factory swap modules that let competitive shooters and duty officers use the same hardware with different performance characteristics. That's not fantasy. It's a plausible evolution in handgun ownership. Counterpoint. If it goes wrong, if the engineering is half-baked, tolerance is sloppy, or price is too high, Gen 6 could be a product that tarnishes a trusted name. Aftermarket resentment and early reliability problems can create perception problems that are hard to fix. History is full of products that were technically interesting but commercially unsuccessful because execution lagged behind concept. Final recommendation. My bottom line take. Gen 6 is worth watching closely. The safety improvements and optics integration alone are meaningful. The modularity and trigger cassette are exciting if and only if they work reliably and if pricing is reasonable. For users who have specific needs that Gen 6 solves today, it could be worth early adoption. For the majority who value reliability and broad accessory support, waiting until the platform proves itself and prices stabilize is the smarter move. This is an inflection point. Glock historically moved slowly and deliberately. The patents and product moves suggest they've decided to meet modern expectations rather than defend legacy designs. That's a big deal for shooters, collectors, and agencies alike. When the rollouts happen, watch the details. The devil is always in the tolerances. Tell me which part you want me to follow up on first. Hands-on reliability testing, holster compatibility, a shoot-off comparison between Gen 5 and Gen 6, or an aftermarket readiness report. Drop your pick in the comments and I'll prioritize the follow-up deep dives. Thanks for listening. Train safe, check your local laws, and keep the conversation civil. I'll be tracking Gen 6 through the first announcements and reviews, and I'll bring you the hands-on testing as soon as the first production units hit the bench.